So where do you start, and how do you decide where you're going to have the biggest impact?
Yeah, I think my view on L&D is that it's there to help the company execute much faster. It's not there to, although it's nice as well to focus on things like growth mindset and helping people. You're helping people by making them perform better.
Right.
So you need to know what are the strategic priorities of the company. What are the things that are absolutely crucial? So when you think about if L&D can keep up with or even support the growth of the company, what are those levers that you need to do?
Right.
And you'll find that often there are things around culture, around onboarding, and specific things in performance that needs support. And that's where you'll start. If that helps the company move faster, that's where you start.
And that kind of performance-driven learning approach that you just spoke about there, Filip, does that make it easier for you to communicate with the rest of the business? Because you're no longer talking about, I guess, one level away, which is kind of growth mindset and building a learning culture. You're more speaking the same language as the rest of the business, which is performance and how are we going to hit these targets. Have you found that makes it easier to communicate and identify areas where you can collaborate and help?
Yeah, I think so. I think that if anyone who has heard me speak publicly before, I often say that classroom trainings are dead.
Right.
And it's quite controversial to say that when you're in L&D, and also you can just imagine that once when, in my previous company, when they made me head of L&D, that, you go out and say, oh, I'm going to kill all training. That's one of the first things I do. But it's as long as you focus the conversation on helping people perform better. So if you're a business leader in an organization, when would you, there are so many things that you could prioritize before training, but if the conversation is about performance and helping you reach your goals faster, then there's nothing to worry about. As long as the conversation is oriented towards performance, everybody will be interested in learning.
And what's the best way to have that conversation, Filip? Because, a lot of the L&D teams we speak to have kind of spent years developing the skill to do learning needs analysis and really focus their conversation around learning needs, versus having a performance conversation and identifying performance gaps is a much, much different challenge and requires a different set of skills. So how do you approach those conversations with key stakeholders?
Yeah, I think, so I come from a management consulting background. So that obviously, that helps in having those consulting conversations with business leaders and stakeholders. If you don't have that background, obviously you can pick up a book and learn about some of those frameworks. But other things that you can do is to just, there is a framework called performance consulting. And that is something else that you can do as well, because I think that will inevitably lead to all of the things that you want to discuss when it comes to training and learning. But if you start from consulting around what leads to actual performance and be able to identify what leads to performance, then nobody will turn down that sort of conversation.
What does one of those conversations look like, Filip? So you reach out to a head of a business function. Do you get them on a call in person, and how does that look like?
Yeah, it can depend. You'll do some research about them and what they are trying to achieve and do, so you sort of know the some of the hot topics that they are already working on. But if you're just starting, some of the things that you can ask are what are they trying to achieve this year or next year, and what do they think is keeping? What's the gap? Where's the execution gap? What are some of the biggest challenges that they have? That they're afraid of, that might keep them from reaching those goals, and that delta and that gap will tell you about what they are worried about and what are some of the things that might need training. And if the discussion moves on to be about training, then you can ask questions about what happens if we don't do anything? Is it really a training issue? And if we do something, what are the behaviors that we want to see happen? And what's how do we measure success? How do we know if we've been successful in doing this? So that's just a few examples of some questions that you can start with, and then you'll dive deeper and get into what is actually the root cause to the problem.
Right.
In some cases, there will also be people who reach out to L&D departments to just tell them to do a training.
Right.
Often it can be like people don't understand a process, or they've designed something in the organization and then people don't follow that process, and they think, oh, it's because they don't understand how it's done, so they create an FAQ, and
Right.
then nobody reads the FAQ, and they tell, okay, so now let's contact the L&D team because nobody reads the FAQ and nobody does this, and they ask us a lot of questions, so we need to train them on how to do this. We need to train all the managers, we need to train
Right.
this and that. Have you ever shopped online and you sit in your couch and you're looking for something, and then when it comes to the checkout and you're about to pay and your credit card is in the other room and you're like, forget about it, I'm not going to do it. Yeah. So it's not about knowledge that you don't know where the card is. It's just like, it's not inconvenient.
Yeah.
And a lot of these requests are just, they're thinking of fixing training issues that are just inconvenient to people. It's not that people are stupid or don't know where to find it. It's just like, it's inconvenient, and it's more convenient to just ask someone.
Yeah.
So it's not a training issue. So this is what performance consulting is about. It's about, isolating the root cause so that you can focus the training on the things that actually matters. And then the other things you can tell them that this is not actually a training issue. You should not create a training on this.